Okay, today's book was Flowers for Algernon. Quick spoiler-free review. Flowers for Algernon is about a mentally disabled man who goes through a experimental scientific procedure to increase his intelligence. He goes from an IQ of around 70 to above 100, so I mean above 200 even. He goes from an imbecile to a genius, and finds that his life is not drastically improved by either. It deals with the social isolation and emotional turmoil that would come with such a quick transformation, and deals with a lot of the moral implications, almost playing God for scientists and what it means to be human. It's really interesting and horribly sad. Despite that, I think we would both recommend it. Anything you want to say about it, Barlow?
No, I think you sort of nailed it, really. There are a lot of religious elements to it. The talk of God comes up quite regularly, and about the Tree of Knowledge. But it's an excellent book, and although it is very, very sad, it's a fantastic read, and I would recommend it.
Okay, so from here on out, all spoilers are a go. So if anyone was interested in reading it and hasn't done so yet, this is your warning. All right, Mitch, you were the one that recommended this book. So how did you come across it? Because I'd never heard of it before, but apparently it is very well known.
Yeah, it's I think I just honestly I think I came across it in Reddit. They often just do posts of what's your favourite book of, X, Y, and Z, and Flowers for Algernon always comes up there, and it's always highly reviewed, and people say how sad it is, and people talk about it for quite a long time. So I thought, I'll put it on my reading list, and I'll just get to it at some point. And I picked it up, and I must have read it in about 2 or 3 nights. And it was absolutely, it was just so enthralling. I think because I read it on the ebook, so I'm not sure what it was like on Audible, but the actual the way it was written followed his mental progress. So the progress report was awful, filled with spelling errors and things. So how did that come across on Audible?
Honestly, it was brilliant. I'm just going to find the guy who read its name, like the voice actor, but he did such a good job. To be honest, I think that might have been why I genuinely struggled reading this book or listening to this book, because it was hard, man. Like, because it's autobiographical as well in that kind of fictional sense. Like, it's all written just, it's like his research notes, isn't it? His
just his own reports.
Yeah, and it is brutal. The name Adam Sims was the actor who did it, and he did a fantastic job. And he genuinely did like a really good transformation from somebody who is, mentally handicapped to someone who's like cynically intelligent. Like, he definitely. It's interesting because emotionally he hasn't developed, but he's highly intellectual, and he did a great job in portraying that kind of intelligence, but like emotional kind of juvenile state. It was brilliant, but I struggled getting through it. This is the first book I've ever come across where I had to actually psych myself up to like continuing with it. It was difficult. It was like really hard and very emotional to read, because for me it had this kind of impending cloud just over the book the entire time. At the beginning, it's brilliant. He's such an earnest person, and Charlie's so happy and all this kind of stuff. And the characters definitely later in the book kind of reminisce over how nice he was, and how like embittered and just to say horrible is maybe a bit strong, but his personality certainly changed as his intelligence increased. And it was very difficult, man, like to listen to this, because Adam Sims did a great job portraying it, and I really felt like Charlie was a real person. And it was like kind of getting to know a friend and then watching them like go through some kind of traumatic event or something, because there was getting to see his like innermost thoughts. There was no escaping how like there wasn't much wiggle room on, when you read a book and you go, oh, how did you interpret this character? You literally get Charlie's innermost thoughts. There's no like interpretation or wiggle room. The only time you could possibly have any of that is when he himself is not sure about like how he feels or something.
Yeah.
But it's so personal and so raw and so like embarrassing in parts and stuff where he's like, he doesn't know what's going on. He's confused about like his kind of biology changes along with his mental capacities and all this kind of stuff that would probably be left out of other books. If this was written from one of the Professor Numa or Alison Kinnean, like, other characters in the book, their perception of him would be very different. But getting it from Charlie's like viewpoint, like it's a POV.
Yeah.
It hits twice as hard for me.
You're so right with it being autobiographical. Like I think he betrays someone who's mentally handicapped extremely well, and the way that other people treat them as well. Like you could completely imagine this being. I mean, I know it's science fiction, but it needn't be, except with the heightened intelligence. Yeah, because that is how people are treated. And and I did like a lot of the sort of the arguments and the philosophy around that he thought all these people were his friends when he was going out, and they asked him to dance with girls, or they asked him to go around the corner to see if it was still raining. And
God, it was heartbreaking, man.
It really is. But of course, he was so happy.
He was happy
before he had friends, and it was his mom entirely, and as he regains his intelligence, he keeps seeing the flashbacks of his family and his mom that wants him to be smart all the time, which is what his main draw is, although he never realised it.
Yeah.
And all it ever really brought him is pain to some degree. So as he's not emotionally matured, he looks back at all these events that he used to love and thought were fantastic, and realised that he was the butt of every single joke. So it was a really, really difficult read, but it was just very, very emotional.
I was surprised at its how genuine it felt and how authentic it felt. Now I say that with a big grain of salt because obviously neither, as far as I'm aware, like the person that read it isn't mentally handicapped, and neither the person portraying it. So like but it felt genuine. It never felt like it was either dumbing things down or smoothing over anything. Do you know what I mean? Like the way the people treated him, whilst cruel, wasn't like cartoonishly evil or anything, and it all felt so plausible that
absolutely.
It wasn't like he was being taken advantage of in a like absurd way or anything. Like they asked him to deliver packages which like one of the guys was pocketing like some literally like pocket change just from like the bakeries. He's making like selling baked goods at half price or something when he shouldn't have. So even when he realized he was being used for like criminal enterprise, it wasn't like some giant evil conspiracy. It was really small, and it was a really interesting way of seeing how such a small story, such a personal thing, could have such an impact. Because I think sometimes with modern storytelling, you get the idea that everything needs to be like the world is ending, or this is that. Charlie would get his intelligence, now he's the only man that can save the world from whatever. And he's like, no, like the entire story is just about how he deals with interpersonal relationships.
Yeah,
and
how it changes over time.
And it was so much better for that. It's one of the few stories as well where right at the beginning, I say, you could lose the intelligence you gain. It could be temporary. You might even end up worse. And he signs up for it and he's fine with it. And that is exactly how the book ends. Like right at the beginning, it tells you how it's going to end. And that kind of sense of impending doom, just, I kept expecting something to happen. It's almost like we've been trained through like modern storytelling that there will be a happy ending. And there's just not. No. It's crushing, man. I couldn't believe how much more I was affected by this book than I think probably any book I've ever read. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a weight to this emotionally that I can't recall almost in any medium. Like I've been moved, by other books and films and things of this nature, and you can become upset and all this kind of stuff, but this one really just resonated with me.
No, it's I think Daniel Keyes, like it really is kudos to him for writing just such a an elegant story. But I just think it's so interesting how it's essentially one character that well, it's essentially two characters in one body, and how
That's a very good point, actually, isn't there? There's definitely two Charlies.
yeah, absolutely. And the other both Charlies see each other as well. At their sort of like most vulnerable times. But it's just interesting to see how initially Charlie doesn't understand. He doesn't really know how he got there. Like he knows he works at the bakery. He can't even understand what people are saying on TV. He can barely write, and he has all these experiences, and he can't understand most of it. I mean, even when they come to the Rorschach test, he says, "What can you see?" And he literally can't think of anything other than blotches of ink on a page.
He's very literal, isn't he?
Yeah, because there's literally just nothing there. Like he's living, he's living a life, but it's to most people that would be not worth living or something. But of course,
you say that I was so expecting him at some point to opt out, like when he knew his intelligence was going to drop. I was expecting like the book to end in suicide or something. Like because
it was mentioned quite regularly, wasn't it? But the more intelligent Charlie decided to leave the body for the mentally handicapped Charlie.
I thought that was such an interesting choice because like he talks about how no one had deemed like Charlie as a human being. No one seemed to like treat him as if he were genuinely a person.
Yeah.
And like saying that he didn't have the moral like response or like the moral obligation or responsibility or the right, I guess, essentially. He didn't have the right to take away Charlie's life. You know what I mean? By like ending it. And especially considering I know there's the scientific side where he's the only person so far in history to have done that. And that meant it was very important to catalogue it all the way through. And it would be selfish and, silly to like cut his life short. But still, like...
I mean, again, it comes down to morals with... like, so obviously there's huge religious aspects, or there's like a lot of aspects of God over it where they talk regularly about the tree of knowledge, and there's the bit at the end where Charlie has a bit of a monologue with is it Dr. Newman, where he says, "You said I was nothing before this procedure, because you created me and made this. That makes you gods, effectively," and it feeds into this whole storyline of men shouldn't play God, because I think one of the first people that sees him outside of the surgery says, God made you a certain way. And it's foolish to dabble in it, really.
Yeah, that there was a nurse, and then there was a member from the bakery.
Yeah,
it's a recurring theme. I didn't feel like it intruded too heavily. Like I didn't feel it was particularly preachy or anything. But
no, not at all.
I also didn't come to like a conclusion from it, because usually with stuff like that, whilst the characters were very set in their ways about like, oh no, you shouldn't have done this. It was you've played with God here. They never really go. There's no like lesson to be learned in the sense that Charlie didn't exactly. The scientific experiment wasn't exactly deemed a failure or whatever just because he lost his intelligence. It was always an outcome they were expecting, and it wasn't. They didn't kind of phrase it in a way that made it like. And God is reproaching you for your sins of, gaining intelligence. It was just more like left out there. I guess that you do see it a lot with
it's more
science.
like it's like a plot for foreshadowing, I think, really. Because there's a lot of foreshadowing in the book. I mean, when he first meets, Algernon, and he's going through the mazes, and initially, he doesn't actually like Algernon because he's more intelligent than him.
Yeah. Which is interesting because that's basically the relationship everyone else starts to develop with Charlie as he becomes more intelligent, isn't it? It's exactly what he does, the exact same thing to Algernon that everyone will then do to him.
That's the thing, and I think he even says something about life is just a series of mazes. So there's a lot of foreshadowing, there's a lot of metaphors, and once Algernon starts to weaken as well, and he starts to attack people that are close to him and things, it's again, it's foreshadowing of what's going to come for Charlie, and of course. At the end, when he produces the Charlie Gordon effect, the paper that he can't remember actually writing,
Yeah.
it was the increase in intelligence is directly proportional to the amount of time that you have it for. So it was a very, very sharp spike, whereas for Algernon, it had happened for quite a long time, and it was very, very gradual on the come down. But for
It's
Charlie, I mean, those last sort of like I think when him and Mrs. Kinnian got together at the very end, she was only there for 10 days, whilst he completely descended into well, yeah, I don't know, like,
idiocy.
yeah, basically, yeah.
I think as well what was interesting with there's a kind of idea there that you could gradually increase intelligence marginally and mitigate it. So, maybe you don't become a genius, but you become like a functional member of society, and it could last for much longer.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that left it with a little ray of hope. I can't say I really knew what the book was about, or in the sense that like I felt that the book had a specific thing it was driving at. The biggest thing I took away from it was how the inadvertent lack of respect Charlie was given when he had lower intelligence. That was the thing that hit me the hardest. Like I thought that was something that made me think about, like, how are you going to treat people? How are you going to deal with this, like, personally? Because to be dismissive or something just sometimes feels like the most logical way. Like, you just almost assume that this person just cannot understand you. But at least through this telling of the story, like, Charlie was very much, even when he couldn't understand, he still, like, was emotionally all there. He still understood or could still become happy or sad. And it was like denying his humanity, denying like that he was really or being treated like a human being because of his intelligence, kind of felt. I'm trying to explain this personally, trying to explain this well. The fact that everybody didn't treat him like a genuine human because he didn't have very much intelligence, but that he still had like an emotional understanding, and even if it was different to everyone else's, like he felt happy even though he was being made fun of. That wasn't any less genuine. Like, he was happy and he had these feelings, and the fact that intelligent Charlie didn't kill himself because he thought that unintelligent Charlie deserved the right to that life. I thought that was one of the things that stuck with me.
They both the intelligent Charlie realised that his life was worth living. Even when he didn't, he wasn't very intelligent.
Yeah,
because he still had friends. Like, I mean, it's sort of that ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Really, because Charlie was incredibly happy when he was, being tricked, or people pushing him over and things, and when he was the butt of the joke. When people kept saying in the bakery, "Oh, I've pulled a Charlie Gordon." Yeah, and he loved it but he didn't understand what they were talking about. But he was so much happier than the intelligent Charlie was. So, I suppose does happiness make you, a life worth living, or intelligence but being sad at the same time? And I think one of the most sort of insightful conversations he ever had was the Warren Home for the mentally. Well, I think they call it retarded, don't they? Because it's an old book. So that Warren Home, when he's talking to the head nurse there, and the head nurse is saying, "You don't understand what it's like. These people that they've still got lives, and they still have things they want to achieve, that they're still enjoying themselves, and yada yada." Of course, completely oblivious to the fact that Charlie Gordon was in their situation previously. And it's just, I think that was quite insightful for him to see that not everyone treats the mentally disabled like people have treated him.
Well, what's funny as well is that Charlie actually catches himself looking down on them, doesn't he? Looking down on the other mentally disabled people. And the fact that he's like, oh, if I had been born intelligent, I would be just like everyone else. Like, he's not inherently better than anyone. Like, he just has gone through stuff that other people hasn't. And I liked that because it wasn't too preachy about it. It was like, you know, Charlie, even when he felt really detached from everyone, recognized that it was only experience and happenstance that was informing the way he was feeling, and that like he wasn't written in a way that Charlie was this like perfect person that had been given this like, you know, curse to kind of carry. He was just as flawed as everyone else. He just had a very unique outlook on life due to his circumstances.
Well, I think when he starts off, his only goal is just to be more. You know, he wants to read good, and the more the intelligence comes back, and the more he gets these flashbacks of, you know, his mother beating him for not understanding words quickly enough, and because she was obviously ashamed of him. And only afterwards do you actually realise that basically he doesn't understand why, and he can't remember why he feels the way that he does. But it's all because he comes from like an awful household where he's effectively been
he's been abused, definitely.
Yeah, for being just the way that again God made him, and his mother sees it as an embarrassment, but just the way that people see them, and it's then ironic that she spends a lot of money on him trying to get him intelligent. Like he sees a doctor that gives him electroshock therapy.
Yeah,
and I believe that's the same doctor that actually recommends Rose Gordon, his mother, to the Warren Mental Institute, because she then later in life has Alzheimer's.
Right.
So it's this sort of not quite foreshadowing, but it's a sort of ironic twist of events that Charlie didn't have to go in there, and he wouldn't have had to if he didn't have this experiment done to him. But his mother would have, regardless, and well, yeah.
It's a tough one to talk to because I keep finding like most of the points I want to make are half baked, and perhaps that's just a reflection on myself more than anything. But I kind of found that to be one of the big things that this book had, where it didn't have answers. It simply kind of said, "Isn't this a interesting and, to be honest, very sad situation?" There wasn't a outcome that was decisive in any particular way. There wasn't like but don't worry, this will lead to this, or here's the moral of the story.
There were a couple that sort of like decisively ended. I mean, with Rose and his sister, they saw him towards the end. Rose, for a second, realised that it was Charlie and he was intelligent again, so she sort of had like a brief second of solace. But then a second later, she came at him with a knife, thinking that he was going to assault his sister. The relationship he had with Faye obviously ended, and the same with Kenyon as well. So I think those things were, cut and dry. But there are other things, like with his father, when he goes and gets a haircut, and of course he doesn't tell him that that he's his son. And actually, at the end, he doesn't tell Norma, his sister, that he's going to basically revert to his original state again. And because she had no idea that what happened to him after he'd been... I can't remember actually what they told his sister what had happened to him, but maybe it was even then that they told him to go to the Warren home. But she was expecting Charlie to come back. So yeah, so even afterwards, he didn't tell her that he was going to regress to an earlier form. So there are some events which are, fairly cut and dry, and there are other ones which, have just been completely left open.
I felt like a lot of it, though, even the even say like what you've called cut and dry, so the relationship with Faye and other things, I still felt like there wasn't anything to be learnt from it, or there was things to be learnt from it, but it wasn't decisive in the sense that the book was telling you like what to think, which I always like, because I don't think it should be written. I don't think you should ever just try and like kind of beat someone over the head with your ideology. But like Faye, basically, they meet each other, they have a good time. Then she gets concerned that Charlie's acting weird, which we obviously know why, because he's intelligent and he's basically facing a death sentence. But there's not a whole lot to like he doesn't tell Faye either. Like, he doesn't tell his dad, and nothing really gets resolved. It almost seems like, to me, like he wants people to remember him as he was, rather than think of him as he will become, and as he will become, as in less intelligent and things like that. Once again, I don't know, man. I feel like it's a tough book to talk about because, I mean, so much of it is.
I think it's quite subjective, isn't it? Because it's all in the mind, and it's all about morals and things that don't really quite have
quantifiable outcomes. Yeah.
I mean, the first book he reads after the surgery, Alice King gives it to him, and it's Robinson Crusoe, and he says about how he feels really sorry for the man running on this island because he's all alone, has no friends, and of course that's all Charlie wants, is to be able to read and to be able to participate in conversations and to have friends, and actually. I suppose again it's that sort of no man is an island, and so he originally had friends, but he wanted more friends. But the more intelligent that he got, the more he lost, and he even lost the friends that he had originally because he could think about the previous engagements that he had with them and how awfully that they treated him. Really,
yeah. I'm somewhat left at a loss. This book has been really informative for me, and especially someone that grew up with special needs and needed to have all these extra little bits and pieces. Nothing compared to obviously what Charlie went through, but it resonated with me twice as hard because of that. And I appreciated going to extra classes and going to all these external institutes to try and improve my reading, writing, everything, blah blah blah. I could empathize a little more, but it felt like the lessons that Charlie learned essentially were kind of bleak and a little, whilst probably very realistic, were a little unfulfilling as somebody reading the book. I wanted to see him overcome some of the issues. I wanted to see him resolve some of his past traumas, but in the end, none of it was resolved, or at least not in a satisfactory manner from my viewpoint. I kind of felt like this is one of those books where it definitely had a definitive ending in a lot of respects. Like, he regressed to the point where he had to go to the Warren home, and the life of at least intelligent Charlie was over. And I did like that. I liked that there was it was a complete story in a lot of respects, but I felt that I guess I was looking for some kind of greater truth, which is of course a fucking tall order for any book to kind of come out with. But this book was very emotionally evocative and very intellectually stimulating. I kind of felt a little lost at the end of it. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't sure what the purpose was, and maybe there wasn't a purpose, that not all things need to have a purpose, but it was a very difficult read for me. And when I walked away from it, I think I was just kind of glad it was over more than anything else, which is a rare feeling for me, because regardless of what I read, I tend to enjoy it at least to some extent.
That's so strange, because it made me sad. I was very emotional for the whole reading of it, really. But when it was over, I was so. I was pleased, I suppose, really, because I don't. I think the one thing to take away from it is that he didn't regret anything that had happened. Although he couldn't remember it, he was still happy to have been a part of it. He was still happy that there were memories. And he essentially got his old life back and went to the Warren Institute. But yeah, no, I think I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I suppose there's no big message in there or anything. It's just an interesting way of looking at people's relationships with people with mentally handicapped or emotional maturity and how people sort of navigate through life, and I suppose you can draw quite a bit from several of Charlie's personalities. When he's a super genius, but he has the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old. I suppose it's something that I keep thinking of just as time goes on now. As it sort of makes more sense the more people I meet, and just gives me a better respect for mentally handicapped people. I would say.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I don't regret reading the book at all. It simply was very different from almost anything I've ever read before. Do you know what I mean? Like it
Oh yeah.
was incredibly unique, and I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, definitely, but if anyone's looking to challenge their perceptions or just looking for kind of some like a genuine mental exercise, in empathy, I can't really think of anything that would do as good a job as this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you want to wrap that up there? I feel like it was an odd one. I can't say there's so much within the book to unpack, and yet I feel like I couldn't do a good job at doing it. I felt like sometimes when I was trying to talk, I almost couldn't get my thoughts straight, which is weird because I've spent a fair bit of time trying to like put it all in order.
Yeah.
I mean, in some respects, that's a good sign, for a book that makes you think that deeply and doesn't, provide you with any like set rhetoric to just like repeat. But on the other hand, I found like I definitely took something away from it, but I'm just not sure yet what it is.
Yeah. But as you say, it's very subjective. It was a fantastic book, and there's a lot of themes in there. And I suppose only upon reading the book can you actually appreciate the experiences that he has and the foreshadowing and everything else. But I would, 100% recommend the book, and and just for people to make up their own minds and take out what they can from it.
So next time we're doing another kind of thought experiment on what it means to be human and how different personalities in your different bodies affect. So we're going to be looking at Altered Carbon, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which is a book about futuristic technologies where people's consciousness can be transferred to different bodies and what that implies for humanity and, I guess, in particular, the characters of the book.